To order. Okay, let's call the meeting to order at 6:06. And Nancy, you have attendance?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And speaking of attendance, we have another open seat. Elizabeth Waterhouse has moved on to bigger and better things. She's now has her seat on the town council, so we congratulate her on that and wish her well. So we have two open spots that we are working on to fill this committee. Let's go to old business approval of minutes. We've got from September 20th minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Bob.
Second.
Second by Lois. Any comments, corrections? Don't see any hands. All in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 And any nays? I think that was everybody anyways. It is unanimous. Okay. So, updates. Let's move right on to Downs. Got full complement here. We got Tom and Scott and Johnny and Anthony was here. Jeff,
Right.
who's the spokesperson?
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. I put together a quick agenda just to go run down what's going on with the project and where we stand to date and what's coming up in the near future. All right, let me know if everybody could see my screen.
We're good.
All righty. So as of October 4th tonight, item number 1, project update. Item A, subcontract and permit update. All the letter of authorizations have been forwarded to all bid package, and some contracts are being procured. Early subcontractor contracts have been issued for the demo, site, concrete, temp fence, steel, plumbing, HVAC, and electrical. Those last two subcontractors, plumbing, HVAC, and electrical, have some long lead items, so that's why we were diligent on getting them a contract issued right away. So we could get that submittal process really going, get them to start attending MEP coordination meetings, which we have been holding. We're a couple weeks in. An update on permits. We still continue to review the status of the building department with the building, the status of the building permit with the building department. Right now, we're waiting on the wetlands and the fire marshal to complete their review and some documentation there. Once that's all said and done, we should be able to obtain our permit. The application for the demolition permit for the mass demolition has been submitted to the building department for both Riley and Prosser by our demolition subcontractor. Right now, outstanding paperwork for the building department is the certificates of the utility disconnects. Once they receive that, they should be able to release the demolition permits. But that correlates to the flood management certificate. We cannot trench, we cannot move dirt around until we get that FMC, so we could get down below the dirt and we can make these disconnects. So at this point in time, I'll review that in the project schedule update, but we're working diligently with all team members to get that FMC approved and reviewed. I know Jeff, TSKP, Rock, ourselves, the town, everybody's been, hitting this from all sides to make sure this gets done before that October 20th date is when we are supposed to start the mass demolition of the building. Going down the line on this agenda, item B here is the construction schedule update. I'm going to break it down into 3 separate sections here. I'd like to talk about Prosser first, then the Riley, and then just the overall site and what's going on there. Prosser, all items that were to be salvaged have been taken by the Department of Public Works as required. Our subcontractor and site super Jason have worked with Glenn and his staff to get that stuff out of there in a timely manner. There is one thing I still believe that's left, which is that big, huge, that dollhouse, which we need to take a couple doors down to get that thing outside. Temp fence and scrim has been completed as of today. The custom scrim layout is to be prepared and reviewed for next week. We'll get that applied once that gets approved. Second floor abatement is to is to be completed and cleared out by the end of the day on the 6th, which is Friday. Then we're moving on to the main floor abatement, setup containments and removal of that asbestos the beginning of next week, which is the start of 10/9, which is Monday. We're also going to start the exterior window abatement, which was found on GeoQuest's report, the additional windows there that were hot. We're going to start taking care of that, get those all cleaned up. Interior sheetrock demolition will begin on the 3rd floor tomorrow. Up there, asbestos wasn't found, so we are moving with the sheetrock demolition and proceeding with that interior stuff. I just want to let everybody know and reiterate that even though mass demolition happens and you think, once we're done abating the building that we're just going to be able to rip it down, based on some lead requirements and based on just standard procedure, we need to do a little bit of selective demolition within the building to get those removals out prior to the mass demolition, which will consist of what I like to call it the skin and bones of the building, which is the structural steel, the exterior brick, and all that, the heavy stuff. Moving on, mass demo, we're still tracking right now. We're proceeding accordingly for start of 10/24. Again, that all depends on the DEP approval of the FMC. So I know SLR has been on it, like I said, ourselves, the town, everybody. So let's keep pushing and let's keep trying to hit them from all ends to get this passed. Moving on to Riley, temp fence and scrim has also been completed as of today. Our trailer was actually dropped off as well. I forgot to put that on here. We're starting to get that set up. Asbestos abatement will begin next week on 10/9. All right. And as we move to the site on the exterior of both buildings, sedimentation and erosion control measures are currently being installed throughout the entire site on both plots, the Prosser and the Riley. And then tree and brush removal are in progress as well. And that basically takes us to where we are today. Behind the scenes, we're still working on getting that VE formalized via an ASI from TSKP. We're still working on some additional items there. We do have a meeting coming up next week scheduled with the building department to go over a second review of the drawings and the progress of the building with Dwight and his team, as well as take care of a pre-installation meeting for the mass demolition. At this point in time, does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns?
I see Patrick's hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Anthony. Just a couple quick things. So for Riley, I was just curious, where is there abatement? Where is there asbestos in that building?
I can't remember exactly on the report. There was a little bit.
Ah,
There wasn't much, so they should be done in a couple of days out there. I would have to look at the report off the top of my head. I'm not too sure, Patrick.
gotcha. Okay. And
But
then
there's not as much, obviously, as there was in Prosser, so it should be a pretty quick and
Mm.
easy task.
Okay. Okay, then my next question is back to this deep thing. What would you say? I mean, is the basic holdup on this? Is it they're just not doing it fast enough? Is it
It's kind of
backlog?
been Patrick, it's kind of been a combination of things. It's number one is they lost our original submission, so they couldn't find it. So we had to go back to the drawing board and send them another copy. I know
Okay.
DEC did their review. I know they've had meetings with the DEP. I know SLR's been in touch with them, but it's just a simple fact of I think number one is they lost our original when we submitted it. And I think, to be honest with you, they're slammed.
Yeah. So, I mean, it definitely sounds like we're doing everything we could possibly be doing to get it moving along, but I was just wondering, is there anyone who can contact them? Like, would it be a town manager contacting Deep? Is it?
So Patrick, I spoke with the town engineer today, and he knows the contact out at Deep who was on the email, and he did reach out to him this afternoon. I don't know what came of that, but
Yeah.
there's not really much to review and approve based on his understanding and what's really out there. So he's trying to chase it down. I know Rocket from SLR had a meeting with Deep yesterday morning, trying to straighten them out on what needs to be reviewed and, within the application, what's important and how to go through it. Getting a timeline has just been really rough. We just
Yeah.
can't seem to get, no one can seem to get an answer out of that. So I'll check in with the town engineer tomorrow and see what's what.
Wow.
Yeah, it's tough.
Okay, but they're aware, like, we want to start demo on the 24th, is that?
Yeah, along with the 600 other projects they got going in Connecticut, no one's a priority. That's the problem.
Yeah, okay, it sounds like we are doing what we could do. It's just seems like this has been on the list for such a long time.
Since the end of
Patrick, we
June.
also kind of talked about, mass demoing the building down, and then once we get to those utilities, then clear them out to buy us a couple more days in a week or two to get, some time for the DEP. But based on the building department, they're going to want to see those disconnect certificates all signed off and in a neat, nice bow for them to give us that permit.
Yeah. Okay, last quick thing is the signage. I did see the fencing and all of that, but I thought we had to put up signage about, the work that's taken place and who's running the project and.
Yeah, Patrick, that would be the DECD, the state sign.
Yeah.
We did talk to Manafort actually today about getting a proof of it. Once we do get that proof of that sign, we will submit it to everybody for their review and approval to make sure everything is spelled correctly, names are on there where they need to be, and so on and so forth. And once that's done, I'm sure they'll release it to Sign Pro or ASI or one of
Yeah.
the sign companies in the state.
Does that have to be posted, Anthony, before we do the demo?
We like to get it as soon as possible, but and I don't think it's going to affect that prior to
Okay.
demolition. No.
Okay. Thank you both. Thanks, Scott and Anthony. Thank you.
Problem.
Okay, Lois?
Thank you. As you know, I've been also very, very concerned about getting the deep thing straightened out. And I'm wondering if it isn't time to ask for help from our state rep, from our mayor. I understand that people like to go in the chain of command, but if this project is going to be held up because of that, we may need to be a little more, we may need to get some help other than the town engineer. So I don't know who does that, but I think given our history, we should have a right to say, look, we need it. We're going to be set back. It's going to make everything more expensive. We understand that you're overwhelmed, and I understand that more than most people, I think. But we need to push. Other people will be pushing. So we need to be pushing with all the power we have to get that through. That's one thing. The others are less immediate, but you are taking down one of the trees. And if you go to the temporary library at the atrium, you'll see across from the circulation desk, a beautiful bench that was built in 1800 out of a tree, and which was at the Congregational Church where the library was. And I think we ought to be doing something like that with the remains of the tree that you're taking down. The big, is it a maple, I think? Maybe it's an oak.
It's an oak, I believe, Lois.
So I would really recommend that somebody look at that so that people have a sense that it would be a very nice thing to have as a pair, the 1800 one and the 2023 one.
Lois, I do believe that a section of it is going to be delivered to Public Works, or they're going to pick up a piece of it so that they might be able to do something with it, as you suggested.
And there are lots of people who make things like that in the town. It could be a larger project for people who wanted to do it on a volunteer basis. Third thing is that someone mentioned to me that they were concerned that the Army Corps of Engineers might be developing new flood standards. And if they did that, would our project not yet built be grandfathered under the old standards?
From what I remember in pre-design, the design team had checked in with the Army Corps of Engineers and the civil engineers, and there was no issue with what was going on with the project as far as they were concerned. But
And
that's dating back quite a while, but
well, I'm just concerned about the climate change and everybody's basement being filled.
Mhm.
And the last thing is that if you want people to hate the library, it will happen no more quickly than not being able to get into the center of town, which I tried to do yesterday because someone was taking a tree down on one side of the road. So there was a single line and everybody was operating according to the lights. And it took 20 minutes to get from, is it Maple maybe? Gab Road to the center of town. So I would suggest we're gonna need a policeman there. We can't just depend on the lights. Traffic has to be directed or people are gonna be really furious. I was. Thank you.
Hey, Lois, if I might add to that, I was out there today. There was actually a flagger, but it was on the Mountain Avenue side. And not to make more misery for you, but the town will still be starting work on the Mountain Avenue sidewalk project, which, as you know, well, if you don't know, for those who don't know, we'll be running the sidewalk up from Ocean State Job Lot up to the cemetery. That will also require some flaggers or police officers on times where it will be down to a single lane. So that's not going to help anymore alleviate the issue of trying to get through the center of town in a timely basis. It's going to add to the misery.
But
Right,
just
there was
having
a-
someone there is what's important, I think, so that someone's organizing it.
Well, there was a flagger today and I did, like you, I did see a backup of people who were trying to get onto Mountain Avenue from any of the other three directions.
Right, that backup today that was going over the bridge, I don't know if the committee level was aware of this, because I know we talked about it and discussed it at the OAC meeting, but that work that was happening at the bridge was actually the state of Connecticut doing test borings for a replacement bridge coming up in the next couple of years. So that's the reason why that was being held up today with all the flaggers, the trucks, and it looked like a boring company out there running some tests. That was the main cause of traffic out there, basically majority of the day today.
But I think, Anthony, just to add to that.
Yep.
Why don't you let Jason know of the concern so we can have a heightened level of awareness to whenever we are going to be affecting traffic or pedestrian flow, that we make sure we have a plan.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, Lois, thanks for your first comment. I know that the mayor was standing ready if DECD needed some additional pushing. So I will alert the mayor that DEEP is now the culprit, and maybe something can happen along those lines. Elizabeth?
Yes, I just wanted to respond to Lois's comments about the tree. I'm just leaving the Public Art Commission meeting, and I know the Public Art Commission is also very interested in using wood from that tree to create benches for sites in Bloomfield. And I think that the chair, Bob Ferger, had meant to email our chair about that. So I'm relaying that. I know that he's already been in conversation with the Bloomfield Beautification Committee about that too. So there's definitely interest in using the wood from the tree that will be felled soon. I also just wanted to note, also to Lois's point about the Army Corps of Engineers, very interestingly, all of this rain and my reports from Downs and Public Works was that we had no flooding, which was really interesting to hear, and I don't understand. But I don't know if work was done upstream from the Washbrook, but it seems to have been able to hold water better over the past 6 months or so.
You want to
Yeah,
go back into
no flooding
process?
at all.
Is that the idea?
Definitely not. But for
But-
our future building, I think the site is going to be a great site moving forward.
I'd like to think that's just our presence on site, Elizabeth. Things are already getting better.
Okay, what else? Anthony, anything else or anything else?
That's all I got for now. As this thing, as we get further on in the project and get some more exciting things happening, I'll start taking some pictures and attaching them to this agenda so everybody could see them and kind of talk to those pictures as well.
Yeah, I know you'll be getting into some regular monthly reports that are very
Correct.
informative.
Yep. Right on.
Okay, and I also want to thank Downs for, I mean, the work that's been occurring has been piecemeal and identified, item by item whether we could go ahead while we're waiting for DEP. So, as it stood originally, we weren't able to do anything, but they've been asking questions, and that's enabled us to get to where we are now. So thanks for doing that. Okay, so let's go on to our architect. We have Richard and Jeff are here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I know that Jeff has been very busy working on an item that was a value engineering item, and that had to do with the pedestrian bridge. There was a value engineering quantity identified by Downs if they could go to a competitive bridge fabricator. And I know that Jeff has been communicating with Downs about that. Jeff, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about your activities.
No, I think we're on board with that, and Scott can probably jump in too. But my assumption here is that we will go with the snow melt system with the pavers, the brick pavers for the bridge, and that Bridge Brothers will be pursuing shop drawings and calculations, and then I'll be reviewing them. It's my assumption that they'll follow our contract documents in terms of the alternate drawing that we did in there. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't, but that's just a continued sort of process. So I think I've vetted all my concerns and thoughts with Scott and everybody on that. So I think we're ready to run on that. I do have a VE list of everything for the first PR. I'd like to get out ideally tomorrow. I did the entire write-up. I sent it to Scott of Downs and Anthony and John for some final blessing. I got most of all the sketches done, so I'm ready to get that out as soon as I get the review back from those guys.
Yeah, I think that's a great update, Jeff. And our biggest goal is to ensure that we can hit all those numbers solidly once the PR gets sent out. So the snow melt system can be realized, and I think it's close, and we're definitely going to push it. And once we know it's there, grab it and get the design going for sure. Absolutely.
Jeff, can you tell us what a PR is?
A PR is a proposal request, so it's basically anything that's going to deal with money. So whether it's a credit or a cost of the project, we have to instigate or institute a American Institute of Architects proposal request through the documentation of the project. And ASI typically is something that's no cost. So it's basically instructions that clarify certain things with the documents or the specs to help move the project forward. So a PR is a proposal request. So I write this request up, I submit it to Downs, they get the price and they evaluate it, they look at it, and then it gets approved by Downs, you folks, and I've already signed it when I initiate it.
Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah, a lot of alphabet soup going on already.
Yeah, sorry about the jargon. You'll all learn a lot of new terms before the project is done. Is that it, Jeff?
Yeah, that's all I have for now.
Okay, great. So I would like to just briefly talk about my initial thoughts about McMahon, some possible scenarios for McMahon going forward. And if I may, I would like to share my screen and show you some slides I prepared for tonight's discussion.
Go ahead.
So bear with me here. Okay, I imagine you can see my screen already. So in my mind, I see 4 possible scenarios for McMahon going forward. and I outlined them here on this chart. The first scenario is understanding that we have a limited amount of money. If we were to proceed right away and spend that money wisely, and that would be limiting the renovation work to just the existing square footage, 5,600 square feet, not building addition. With the intention, though, of building an addition subsequently. So we have to be careful that any renovation work that would be done to McMahon in this scenario is not something that would have to be undone when the addition is built. So we have to carefully select what that work would be. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. The drawings for such a scenario, the design and construction of that scenario has not been done yet. So we need to discuss what the design fee would be for doing that and whether or not you want to proceed with this scenario. So that first scenario is capping the work so that we don't exceed the available funds that you currently have. The second scenario would be a complete renovation of McMahon. And I don't believe that there would be sufficient monies that you currently have, although we do have to test this by looking at more details. But the idea here is that we would do a complete renovation of the project in the existing square footage, and then revise the plans and bid. So the first scenario is just putting a cap on the amount of money. The second scenario would be what would be a complete renovation of that kind of project. We already have some sense of what needs to be done. Glenn Garrity provided through Nancy, I believe, reports that he had done showing the deficiencies in McMahon, the limited lifespan that's left for the roof. I believe he reported that only about 8 years of life is left for the roof, for example. So maybe we don't have to address the roof initially, but if we're going to do a complete renovation, we probably would want to address the roof. The third scenario is let's not redesign anything. Let's not do the above two scenarios and just wait. Wait until we can get additional funds obtained either through a community investment fund grant through DECD, or perhaps obtain grants from other sources that haven't been identified yet. So this would not require a redesign. It just means waiting. The fourth scenario is start a new state library grant application. And that would entail going through an RFP and an RFQ, or RFQ first and then an RFP from an architect and a construction manager, because the state library grant would want that to be part of that process. We need to get that done in that sequence. And that's probably the longest timeline to get that done. And I don't know whether that would require redesign, but that's the four scenarios that I have in my thinking. There's a little bit more information about these four scenarios. Again, in the first scenario, that's limited renovation. We just spend as much money as we have, and we spend it carefully so that it doesn't compromise any addition that would be done. And I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Second scenario is we do everything that is deficient, and it may go beyond the amount of funds that you currently have available. So we'll need to talk about how that would be funded. The third and fourth scenarios are addition and renovation to McMahon Library, just as it was envisioned previously. Funding strategies, we have just thought about using available funds, maybe funding some additional, but we don't know what that source would be for a complete renovation. And then in scenario 3, community investment fund grant from the state. And scenario 4 would be basically starting all over again and starting with a state library grant, and going through their full process. We believe that the amount of money that you currently have in hand for the project at McMahon is 2.2 million. That should be verified, but I believe that's what the number is. We don't know what the number could be for scenario 2. I think we need to investigate a little bit more about what the deficiencies are in order to make it renovated like new. Scenario 3 is, we know that the project was bid earlier this year, and that number that was from the bidders was roughly $10.1 million. But if we're going to wait until we can get some additional funding from CIF, we're going to have to add inflation costs to that. And I would rely on, I think, Downs to help us determine what that inflation cost, how much that inflation cost would add to the project. And scenario 4, I don't know yet what that number could be. Soft costs, we do need to add in both scenarios 1 and 2, some redesign and cost estimating services for that. Whereas in the other 2 scenarios, or scenario 3, we already have a design that would not be any additional soft costs there. And scenario 4, if you have a different architect and a different construction manager, you'll have to probably have that factored in as well. In terms of the plans and specs, the first 2 scenarios have not been developed, whereas in scenario 3, they're already ready to go. You can use the existing plans and specs. And scenario 4 is a little murky in mind. I don't know whether you could reuse the existing plans if you have a different architect. That's something that needs to be worked out. I believe the grant applications, the deadlines for scenario 3 is this December 15th, in order to get in line for the CIF funding. And scenario 4, that deadline would be next year for state library grant. We could get started with scenario 1 in terms of construction start by next summer. I think the work is not that significant to document plans and specs. I think you could put that out to bid and get started by next summer. And I believe that was a 1-year construction duration, so you could be finished maybe by spring at the earliest of 2025. Now let's talk a little bit about what we mean doing renovation work at McMahon in anticipation of later than adding onto the project with an addition without compromising any of the renovation work that we would be doing. So I asked Deanna to do a couple of overlays. This is a quick sketch of a McMahon scenario, a plan for scenarios 1 or 2, which would be to reorganize a few things at McMahon right now, such as building new staff office and new study room here temporarily, putting an IT workroom here, relocating the circulation desk. Right now it's located here, but we could place it here, which is approximately where we would have a future desk. But we would reuse that circulation desk in this location. And then we would have a children's area here and a teen area here. We would keep the toilet rooms and electric rooms where they currently are in this scenario. And then when we're planning the future addition, we just need to be mindful in the renovation work of McMahon that we shouldn't be, for instance, let me back up a second. So one of the items that was cited in the Glenn Garrity report is that there's some problems with these windows, as well as his recommendations to put new mechanical units along this window. But I wouldn't do that, because if we're anticipating building an addition, that glass wall is going to come out. So that's what I mean by not doing certain things in anticipation of an addition. So if we just compare this plan with this plan, you can see that that glass wall is going to be removed. And then our staff office here is going to be then converted into a mechanical room and an IT AV room here, and then a kitchenette. So that temporary new staff office here is only going to be there briefly until we build the addition. And the same thing is true here. We have a new study room. The plan in the future is to have 2 study rooms in that location. And then we would build a new community room and cafe area that's leading into the community room. And at this stage, when we would be building the addition, then we would look at renovating some of this area. Remember, we were planning to expand these bathrooms and create some slightly different areas. So this is like in just doing the first scenarios 1 and 2, and then trying to minimize the impact on any potential undoing of those improvements when we build the future addition. I'd love to get your reaction to my thoughts about these 4 scenarios. Maybe in your mind, there's more than 4, but this is just still a work in progress, and I'd love to get some feedback from the committee.
Okay, well, Ava has her hand up. Ava?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Without commenting on the rest, because I would need to absorb this, scenario 4, the current funds from the referendum that already exist would probably have to be expended before we can apply for a new state library grant. They can't be in place because that would mean that you were already using an architect, you're already using contractors, you're already using a construction manager. I think all of those things, the new rules came out recently, and I read through them, not with an eye toward this, but I will look at them again. But I think the project, whatever it is we decide to do for the time being, if any of it is occurring in terms of renovation, I think it might have to be concluded before we would qualify to apply for another grant. They're very stringent about any kind of stacking of grants. And since the current project is so problematic from them, I think that this would probably not be an option until the 2.2 million, give or take, was already expended. Thanks.
That's a very good observation. Thank you, Ava.
Yeah, and just to remind everybody that we do have an obligation under the referendum that passed to, we cannot spend all of our money on Prosser only. So monies must be spent from the referendum proceeds on McMahon. There's no dollar value to that. Just we cannot do it all on Prosser. So we just got to keep that in mind that we need to do that. Lois?
I have a question about the relationship between the 2 projects, because when we bid it, one of the things that was going to attract people to want to bid on either project was going to be that they could do both, and that would have some savings. If we're not doing much at McMahon, is that going to impact the understandings with the people who are constructing, the contractors who are constructing Prosser, or is it all done with the bids accepted?
I'll go first, and then I'm going to ask Downs to comment. You already have bids for both projects. However, you can't use the bids for McMahon because that was with the understanding that they could potentially do both projects. You're right about that. But I believe, and Downs should correct me if I'm wrong, that you should proceed with one of the projects, namely Prosser. The numbers for Prosser are firm, that they're the basis of Downs's GMP, that there's no reneging on those numbers. But I'm not sure how that, so I think you need to redesign McMahon and then bid it again, in my opinion. You can't use the numbers that were in the McMahon bid. You did get a bid, but the scope of work is so different that I think the only way to do the project, even if it's just a limited project, is to rebid it. I don't think you can negotiate down with the current subcontractors that bid numbers previously. Downs, what do you think?
Yeah, you can't. The 90-day period is up and at the end of September, and it looks like McMahon could be a pretty much a completely different job. So you would just be bidding out like any other project to a set of contractors again and getting numbers.
But Scott,
The one thing that-
if I'm not mistaken, though, I do think that there were not that many, the way you bid it out was separately and then asked for a price if they were to do both of them together. And
Yeah,
there
we didn't
weren't a
group
lot,
it.
there were not a lot of vendors, a lot of bidders that bid a lower price on, not every trade package took advantage of that. So the prices you've awarded or the contracts you've awarded for Prosser, if I'm not mistaken, do not take into account any savings that would have happened should we have gone forward with both buildings. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
But there's also the factor that we now have a set of trade contractors working in Bloomfield at Prosser. And
Yes.
if we were to put things out to bid for McMahon, we now have them as possible bidders, and they may see it differently because they're already working in Bloomfield, maybe, but that's just a new dynamic that would happen as a result of putting it out separately now. Patrick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I really like what this is talking about, Rizard, with keeping, doing what we could do in the event of moving forward with the full addition and renovation. And my questions about the RFP thing, or not the RFP, the questions about the referendum and using the money were answered. So I guess my struggle a little bit is between scenarios 1 and 2. So with a limited reno, like I'm not really sure I'm seeing the difference between scenario 1 and 2. So with a limited renovation and a complete renovation, if we still only have approximately 2.2 mil, how would we complete a complete renovation? Or are you saying that funding would be coming from somewhere else?
Yeah, I'm not sure first of all, I'm not sure what the difference in cost would be between scenarios 1 and 2. I do know that you have a limited amount of money, the 2.2 million shown here, and I arbitrarily put it in column for scenario 1. Is 2.2 million enough to do a complete renovation? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
So we do have a whole menu of items that were in Glenn's report that has a whole list of things that need to be done, such as security system, some mechanical improvements, the roof replacement, for example. Should we do the whole roof replacement now? It still has another 8 years left. But if you're going to do a complete renovation, you probably should do the roof, for example. I'm going to need some help with costing both scenario 1 and scenario 2.
The other thing I would like to investigate is the idea that under scenario 1, that work be handled by DPW. In other words, if how much of it could be handled solely by DPW. I mean, if it's some mechanical upgrades, I believe they're capable of putting together a bid package and working with a trade contractor and doing that. So, maintenance kind of work. I think there's a lot of that could happen that way. And I'd like to understand how much of that could happen that way, with a watchful eye, again, to keep it coordinated with any future ideas. But that certainly would save us design costs and management costs. And if we could spend all 2.2 million, perfect, in my mind. If we can spend half of it only on that, well, then let's find out what, where can we go with this in the easiest way. And also from a building committee perspective and our charge, It's kind of the only thing we can do. You know, the other three are, well, let's wait for some funding. You know, maybe we can get a better idea. We would have to spend some money to find out what the cost of scenario 2 is. Because that scope would have to be defined. So that would cost us money to do that. So I kind of see our next step is how can we best spend that roughly 2.2 million, and get on with it and get McMahon open again as quickly as possible also. Ava.
Yeah, thanks. I actually have two comments here. First of all, I don't know if you've watched the finance subcommittee meeting of the council recently. I don't think you can count on Public Works being able to do this. Dan Carter was extremely clear about the fact that he has not got enough staff now. He made it quite clear that town services already will almost undoubtedly suffer because there is a hiring freeze and he cannot get enough staff. So, you know, I can't speak for him, but I think before we would even think about depending on that, having a conversation with him would be good, because I have a feeling that's probably not something that we could do, at least not at this point. And the other thing is, I would like us to not see these plans as mutually exclusive. Even if we were talking about a limited renovation at this point, I don't think that should be entirely separated from the idea of pursuing other funding, whether CIF, other grants that we're unaware of, etc. McMahon is just too small for the needs. So I would not like us to envision scenario 1 as a terminal option of any kind. I think we need to see this as something that either cascades or builds, not that we choose one and it's one and done. I understand the pressure to be back in the building and all of that, but I don't think that that's a reason to limit our vision or limit our efforts to pursue additional funding. Hopefully the council would approve the idea of pursuing CIF and other possibilities. And I can tell you that as a board, we absolutely want McMahon to provide not just the same kind of staff service that we do, but to have the room to put in everything that people need and want and deserve. So I don't want us to have a limited way of thinking about these projects. I would like to see them maybe more as steps in a process, not each being a terminal possibility. Thanks.
Thanks, Ava. Leah.
I mean, Ava put it much better than I could, but I agree. I think, you know, I don't want us to just do some patch up work at McMahon and then, you know, be done. That, you know, not that that's anyone's intention, but I worry that that's what might happen if we don't keep in mind something like scenario 3. You know, I don't know enough about the process to know if like we can do, sorry, my dog is whining at me. If you can hear that in the background. You know, if we can do temporary patchwork, but still promise to pursue funding for like a full reno at McMahon. You know, I think if we don't do a full job there, it's just, you know, I don't think it's the right thing to do. So yeah.
Okay, thanks, Leah. Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair. I am a proponent of scenario 3. I know that when we received the original CIF grant, we were told to go back to CIF if we needed more to complete the project. They were very in tune to shovel-ready projects, as this one is. I also want to discuss how perfect the McMahon-Wittenberry design is for that location. It has everything we needed to meet the needs of that side of town. And specifically around the digital divide, the computer access, and having a community space for people to come together on Blue Hills Avenue. That's just one grant scenario. Going for CIF, I would love to be unleashed to look for as many grants as possible to see how close we could get to fully funding that way. I know I really haven't updated this group about the library board, the state library board, but I have been attending those meetings and talking to stakeholders involved on that side, as the grant has been increased to $2 million now. And just as we learn more about that whole process. But I think that due to the needs and the digital divide and the agenda surrounding economic development, et cetera, I think that doing the project in full would be amazing for the frontline service to the community, but also for the bigger vision and the entryway into Bloomfield from Blue Hills Avenue. That facade being pushed up, I think would change the whole feel of that, and people would actually know it was a library. That was one of the main reasons why it was designed that way, to open it up so you could see inside when you were driving by. So I am still very optimistic and hopeful that we could get a lot more money to help us see this vision through.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear to everybody that one of the hurdles of the CIF grant is it's a town council decision. You know, it's not up to us whether we apply. It's not up to us at all. You know, it's a town council thing. So, you know, I think some of these scenarios in my mind need some interaction between the library board of trustees and the town council, because it's a revisiting of the program. We already saw that the town council was totally unwilling to go get more money, to ask the citizens to go to referendum. So, you know, I think I see the library board of trustees as the advocate here, not the building committee. The building committee needs direction, you know, from the council. We're appointed by the council, and I think we need to hear from the council on, you know, what they want to do moving forward. So, you know, that's the direction I see this going, and how we have to proceed with this. I mean, we're all in. You know, we all love what we came up with, I hope. You know, we all wanted to see it happen. But obviously other people did not want to see it happen given circumstances. So we've got to, you know, we got to go through a process here to get there. And that's the way I see it at the moment. Lois.
Thank you. One of the things that Ava said was the importance of vision. And I'm wondering whether there's any bigger vision for the east side of town now that could incorporate the library too. I know Belk is closed, isn't it? And I'm wondering if there are more services that could be incorporated there. Is anybody even thinking about what kind of services there might be on the east side of town in addition to a library? Because I would hate to go forward with a project that could have been rolled into a larger vision if there is one.
And I think that's another reason why, you know, this goes back to council to get that bigger picture if there is one. Ava?
Yeah. I think it needs to be all of us who talk to the council. when I suggested that we would need permission for the CIF grant, that permission would be something we would ask of the council. But that is something that I think the committee would need to support as well. The board is not the building committee. We of course would support, as we did in the past, advocating for additional CIF funding. But I think they would also want to hear that the LBC also would want to go forward with this project in its entirety, rather than trying one little piece of it and then seeing what happens. The greatest population density in this town is the east side. So, in order to serve the majority of the population here, we need to have facilities that are adequate. If the council were indeed thinking of having an entire municipal complex over there, I think that would be lovely, and I think that's a great idea from Lois. I suspect that given that town hall has really needed something different for a very long time, that might be something that they would be interested in pursuing. But I think this is such a huge amount of stuff to put together, particularly given the pressure that the council is under right now because of, economic circumstances and whatever, that they may be more interested in doing things as steps. We can't make that decision for them, but we can certainly say to them, here's where we are. We would really like to apply for additional CIF and whatever other grants that we can find through the library. The library staff would again be doing, the bulk of the work on this application. And we're perfectly willing to do that, to try and bring this money to the town so that we could proceed and do what we really should do for everybody on the east side. And then it is, of course, up to the council to decide how they want to proceed. We would not presume to say they must, but it certainly doesn't hurt if all of us ask the council to go ahead and let us at least apply for the CIF and see what happens. If it isn't enough money, then it isn't enough money. Or if we're told no, then we're told no. But if we're looking at the balance of this, I have looked at some of the recent CIF awards. Some of them came out this week. There were releases from the governor's office. Some of them are quite large. And for projects that probably are not as core to the needs of the population, particularly in a town where we have such a large percentage of families who are Alice families, families who are below the poverty line, when we can provide, incredibly important services from employment and everything on up, they may look favorably on giving us more money than we expect. So I think it's worth all of us asking the council to let us go ahead and apply for the CIF. Thanks.
Well, I'm not comfortable telling the council where to go get more money. I'm comfortable telling the council that, yes, we want to see this entire project built. And that's what we did already. And I'm willing to do it again, to tell the council that we want to see the whole thing built. But I'll reiterate, it's up to them where they go get the money. And we can enlighten them that there is such a thing, that you can go back for more CIF money. They're well aware of it. But to endorse one method versus another, it's their decision how they go get money. So I think, that's kind of direction that I see this building committee going in. But I also feel like we need more information on how we, the scopes, what is the scope of scenario 1 and 2? Without that information, I'm not comfortable saying one is better than the other. What is it going to cost? I don't know how others feel about that. And at some point, I think we want to make a decision on how and what we're going to request from the council, in the big picture. That's kind of the goal I see for us, you know, in the short term. Lois?
I have a question about the $2.2 million. One concern I have is, have we left something out of Prosser that we're going to want or need? And will then, and if we spend 2.2 million on McMahon and it's a Band-Aid, will we be in a bad position? I just want to be sure that we have everything that we're going to need in Prosser before we spend any of the additional money. I know we're required to spend some, but for a smaller project, which I hear people saying isn't sufficient.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Lois. The dollar amount that we have allocated now to Prosser does include multiple contingencies. So we're not without some safety valve already. Can you use more contingency? You know, who would say no to more contingency? But I think we have to be practical and rely on our professionals to, you know, guide us on what's reasonable. So there, you know, there is some built-in monies there for things that happen or things we forgot or whatever. So that's already in the Prosser side of the equation. It's not in that 2.2. And the 2.2 still needs to be confirmed. I mean, let's not all walk out of here with that number. It's, you know, it's around that. It's around that. I know Downs is still working on establishing, you know, what exactly that is. So do we want to take any action tonight on McMahon? How do we move forward here? Nancy?
I would say that we need more information before we really can move forward. I would like to ask TSKP to identify some of the funding issues or the construction costs first. I really think we need to tie down some of these numbers before we can make a determination as to which way we're going to go, as well as essentially, once we do that, maybe we can tie down some of the targeted dates.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, we put our design team on a pretty short leash at the moment. I guess we need to understand where we're at with that, Richard, and how much more you can complete under the present, you know, fee limit, and then what's the next steps?
Well, I would start with the list of deficiencies that Glenn had prepared, such as the replacement of the existing fire panel, which is a life safety issue. So there's a whole list of these things. I don't know how many they are. I haven't counted them, but there's at least almost 2 pages worth of items. The drinking fountain located between the existing restrooms no longer works and does not meet ADA. I'd like to know what the cost of that would be and whether, if we do that, can it be incorporated into the future project. So if I could impose upon Downs to help price these items, then we can have a conversation about whether it's worth it. And at least we'll have a better understanding of what the cost of scenario 1 and 2 are. Yeah,
So,
I can do that.
So you're still working within, you know, within our limit that we set, correct?
Yeah, I have not exceeded it, no.
Okay, all right, then I would propose, you know, you to continue doing that, but lay out for us, you know, what you think the next, you know, when you're going to cross over that line and what else we're going to need to get a better understanding of, you know, of these costs and scopes.
Yeah, and I would also like to have a better diagram illustrating the, you know, the interim improvements. This is not enough for you to understand really what's going on here.
Right. That's part of the scope definition. I would
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
Let's see, Lois?
I would like to have someone talk to the planner's office or the council or whomever would have the information about whether or not there's a larger idea happening for the east side. Because we need to have that information. Are people thinking of having a small piece of town hall on that side of town to serve the people there? Are people thinking of having some of the services that are available at town hall in addition to the library? I just like to know what the vision is for the east side of town so that we know how the library can fit into that before we start spending money, since we came to such a halt.
Yeah, I like that idea, Lois, and maybe we can invite the proper people to come to our meeting and talk to us. Patrick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I agree with Lois, because I have heard, just here and there, that there is talk about doing some work on that Blue Hills Ave. And, that was designated as a TIF district as well, a tax incremental financing. So that, I believe, includes where the McMahon is located as well. So, I don't know how far that's gone, if any developer has shown any interest in that particular area that's been zoned for TIF. So that would be a very good question, and what are the plans for that area? But anyway, going back to our scenarios, just for my own clarification, I just wanted to make sure. So are we asking to look at what is the scope of scenario 1 if we were to do a limited renovation and try to get an estimate what the costs would be involving that? And then scenario 2, a complete reno, which I would think includes all the items on DPW's Glenn's list that he put out. That would entail a complete reno, so we would need to know approximate costs around that, and then look at the 2 of those scenarios together. Is that correct?
Yeah, essentially, but I see scenario 2 not only not being limited to the DPW list. I mean, I think
Right.
there's, other things that, finishes, and, that, they haven't included because they're not.
Okay.
I've seen.
Yeah, so what is the scope of a complete renovation? Yeah.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Okay, and the only other comment I have is, a new council will be seated at the first meeting in November. So that may be a really good opportunity to possibly get on the agenda to present. Maybe I see 2 presentations, one to talk about the process and where we currently are, so that all the new council members can be brought up to speed on the current status of the project. And then second presentation would be something similar to what Richard has presented tonight with the 4 scenarios. And we could say one of the options is pursuing CIF grant monies, and it's an option, so council would have to act upon that. Now, I don't know if we could be ready by that first meeting in November, but there's a second meeting as well, so I think we'd have to act pretty quickly if the deadline truly is December 15th.
Well, procedurally, and maybe also from an informational and feedback point of view, we may want to go first to their admin and education subcommittee. Granted, that's not all the counselors, but at least to be an initial step. And it would probably be more comfortable if we didn't have 100% finished product, to at least share what we had at the committee level with the council. I'm thinking out loud here.
So was I.
And that way, they see where the direction we're going and get some feedback from them. They may say, great, no way. I don't know. I think that's real important to find out. And then, of course, share it with all counselors as well. But I think if we, yeah, maybe if we target that first admin and education meeting, and I can get some feedback from the mayor on that, whether that's a good idea or not. But I think that would be the direction we could go in. And as far as what a TSKP is doing right now, I don't think we need to take any action. This is what they've been charged with. They're just continuing on the same task. So I think we're in good shape there.
Yep, I'll have more information at the next committee meeting.
All right. Well, thank you, Richard. And,
Okay, I'll
Jeff?
stop sharing my screen.
Any other questions for Richard or Jeff while we've got them? All right, thanks, everybody. Let's go to Sean, our owner rep from Colliers.
Hello, good evening.
Where'd you go? You're moving all over the screen. There you are. Okay.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I have an update on the swing space. Additional emergency lighting was installed yesterday and today. And there was an email request from Glenn Garrity to the inspector to come out at his first availability. It's ready for inspection tomorrow morning. So we'll keep pursuing that to make sure we get those hours extended. Other than that, I've got the PO in hand that was approved last meeting for the materials testing agency, Tri-State. And I will keep following up with the commissioning agent in terms of his draft proposal or his draft plan for the project.
Thanks.
That's all I
Questions
have.
for Sean? All right, it'd be great to wrap that up over at the swing space. So we'll
Yes.
look forward to that. Okay, so Nancy, what are we spending money on? What are we approving tonight?
But first, before I present one of the invoices, when you authorize the Anderson Electric to proceed with the emergency lighting, there was in his quote a built-in price of $625 for an additional fixtures. 4 additional fixtures were needed. So first I would like permission from the library building committee to authorize the purchase of those 4 additional lights.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Ike, second by Patrick. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, now I can move on to the invoice for Anderson Electric. So it's invoice number 21785. It does include 1 additional fixture. 3 additional fixtures were ordered on Monday. So the total amount of the invoice is $18,625.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Mr. Ike. Second by Lois. Thank you very much. Comments, questions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Unanimous. Motion passes. Thank you.
The next one would be to the Atrium CT LLC. It is invoice number 2718. This was for $693.74 for keys that were made in the month of August at the swing space.
So moved.
Moved by Bob Ike, seconded by Patrick. Thank you very much. Questions?
How many keys for $675?
I also had questions about this one.
23 keys.
34,
Well, 23, I think, on this one. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
18, 16, office plus desk, 34 keys. Or is it a separate one I'm looking at, Nancy?
18 office keys and 16 desk keys.
What kind of keys are we talking about?
So I guess I just had a couple of questions here. I guess I was under the assumption that keys would come with the space. I guess that was not how this rolled out. But that being said, we did ask for keys. We didn't get all of the keys we wanted. They kind of gave us these keys. We never were told there was going to be a price. So I have to say I'm quite shocked by the price. It was never run by us. We were kind of just asking for keys. But we need to go back and forth with them to make sure that we get the keys that we actually requested.
So were these keys not, you did not receive these keys that were requested on August 14th?
Allison, we requested specific keys, but we did not get exactly what we requested. Allison, do you want to elaborate?
Yep, so we requested 34 total keys. We were given 20 keys, which is what the invoice is for, is only for 20 keys. But we thought that we asked for a lot of office door keys, and we were only given 2 master keys and then 2 other specific keys for the nursing room and the server room, which are their own keys. Those are separate. But we were requesting office door keys for all of the offices in the space so we could lock them. And we only were given 4 door keys, 2 masters, the nursing room and the server room, with no explanation about why. So if that would be my question, is if we were charged for the keys, why did they not provide all the keys we requested? We thought there was a shortage. We thought, oh, you only had 2 master keys, so you gave us what you had on hand.
So they did give you 20 keys. Did you not get those 20 keys?
We did receive 20 keys.
Okay, so the invoice does reflect what was delivered, but it sounds like you have other keys that you haven't gotten.
Right.
All right, so I guess for purposes of this conversation, they did receive 20 keys.
And that's what this invoice.
And that's what
is
this
for.
invoice is for.
I guess the other question is here too, is setting precedent that they let us know the cost of things before doing things. So they never, the price of this was a surprise to me. I think that they should have communicated that prior to this.
It works out to about $30 per key. So I would like to see the key that costs $30.
There's nothing fancy about them, I can tell you that. And some of the keys we're specifically talking about are keys that come with furniture that was already in there. So they're like little, and I guess I'm kind of curious this because I've never leased a commercial space. Sean, I don't know if you know about this. Is this normal protocol for how these types of spaces operate?
I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to dig into that a little more. Just seeing some of this for the first time, but I can look into that.
Well, we have the choice of paying this or negotiating. Those are our choices.
I guess I'm worried about setting precedent that they can just send us invoices for anything without.
I think what we need to do in the future is if you need something, you ask them for a proposal to get it and not just ask for the item. I think that's what has to happen going forward. So we see a price before there's any action. But in the meantime, we've got 20 keys asked for, 20 keys delivered. We've got a bill in front of us. We have a motion on the floor. Any other comments before we vote on the motion? All in favor of paying the bill for the 20 keys, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And Nancy, take a roll call, would you please?
Sure. Bob Ike,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
who else do we have here? Lois Hager,
No.
Dr. Bryant,
No.
who did I miss? There's somebody else I missed.
think we
Mark
lost-
Weissman?
Yeah.
We lost Jesse.
Yeah, lost you. Chair votes yes.
Okay, so it's 3-2, it passes.
Okay, thank you. So lesson learned here.
So the
Good.
next one, right, the next one we have is also from the HMCT LLC. 2751 is the invoice, and this one is for 2 keys that were provided, and the amount of the invoice is $108.52.
Oh, God.
So the price of the key went up, Lois.
Uh-huh. My vote will be the same.
And well, and what are these 2 keys?
Additional cabinet keys for the service desk.
And you have them?
Yes.
Yeah, we got to do something about that. This is kind of crazy. This is a little crazy. But is this in the contract? Or what's the story?
The contract is silent on who provides the keys.
Oh, wow. This is like the Navy. $100 for aspirin, for a screwdriver. Wow. But there's nothing we can do because we got the keys, and the owner is saying, hey, here's the bill. I gave you the keys. Here's the bill. And like the chair says, we got to get future on. We got to get a proposal first before, if we want anything from these people, we got to get it in writing. Proposal, bring it to committee, then we'll decide. But I know you guys need to operate.
Yeah, it's just interesting because we were working back and forth communicating with them, but then they never sent us the bill or anything. It went straight to town hall.
Okay, do
Got
I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Ike. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Patrick. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I would suggest that Sean talk to them and tell them that we had this discussion, and some of us were extraordinarily surprised at the price of the keys. We're just getting started. We're going to have a lot of things to buy in the next year or so, and people need to know that we're watching.
Okay.
Any other comments? Nancy, would you go around again,
Sure.
please?
Bob Ike,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
Lois,
No,
Dr. Bryant,
No.
and Mark Weissman.
Yes.
Okay, passes 5-3. 3-2, which equals 5.
All right. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
And I think that is all that I have for invoices. Yes.
Okay. Comments from the committee. The mayor has called for a meeting on Friday with her groundbreaking team, if you will. So that's moving forward. And it looks like the week of October 23rd is targeted. The date hasn't been set yet, so hopefully it will be set at this Friday meeting. Nancy.
Yes, I didn't mean to steal Downs' thunder early, but I know in the future they will provide pictures. However, I was out at Prosser earlier today, so I did have a few pictures that I would like to share with the committee. So this is looking across Tungus Avenue. You can see that the scrim on the fence is up. And where's the other two? Should be, hold on. For some reason they can't go. Okay, this is the construction trailer. For those of you who have not been driven by the site, the construction trailer is over on the property of the Riley property, adjacent to the plaza that's right behind it. As you can see, they're setting it up. It will be their home for the next 2 years approximately. And then the third picture I have is also taken from Tungus Avenue. It's kind of a little bit north of the building. It's hard to see, but they are doing some abatement activities, and you can see that, and you can see right there, there's I peeked through the fence. You can see there was a little dumpster there. So for those of you who hadn't been by, just wanted to give you a little bit of update. And Downs typically provides pictures as they move along in their reports to the building committee. So that's all I wanted to share.
Thanks, Nancy. Okay. Other hands from the committee? Okay, and let's go to public. Nancy, do you have any hands up from the public?
There's 2 people in the public. Does anyone want to speak? Okay, no hands are up, Chair.
All right, well, thank you, members of the public, for joining us, and thank everybody. Do we have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Lois, second by Mr. Ike. All in favor, please wave goodbye. All right.
Thank you.
Everybody be well, and we will we're meeting again in 2 weeks. And I will not be present. Patrick will be running the meeting. So thank you, Patrick.
You're welcome.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.